Good evening and welcome to the 537th episode of Travelage Radio. I'm Dan Schlossberg along with Roger Noriega, and we are in the 13th season of Travelage Radio, the show that lets you enjoy the pleasures of travel from the comfort of your armchair.
Every week at this time, we talk to people representing destinations, hotels, airlines, railroads, car rental companies, and others in the world of travel and hospitality, from authors and bloggers to broadcasters and publicists. If it's got anything to do with travel, it's got everything to do with Travelage Radio.
Our guest tonight is Tim Fordham-Moss, live from London to talk about the legendary St. Ermin's Spy Hotel. Welcome, Tim, to Travelage Radio.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome to you and to Roger, too.
Tim, you wear many hats as the founder-director of Wicks Hill Limited, a London PR firm whose clients include Red Sea Holidays, Cruise Kings, San Michel, My Canada Trips, and Steam Dreams Rail Company, which appeals to my love of trains. But we're here today to talk about another of your clients, St. Ermin's. Why is it called the Spy Hotel?
Well, that's a good question, but it's called the Spy Hotel because since about the 1905s, it's had a pretty close relationship with mainly the British secret services, but also the French and the Russian.
Okay. You've got to tell us how old it is, how big it is, and where it is located.
The hotel was actually built as we call it a mansion block. You guys would call it an apartment block.
Oh.
But it was built as a mansion block in 1892. And in those days, they had a habit, particularly in London, of building mansion blocks with apartments that had no kitchens. Everybody lived above the first floor, and on the ground floor there'd be a large lobby and reception, and then there'd be communal dining areas, restaurants, and basically the apartments were really for people who could afford a lot of staff, butlers, maids, cooks, etc. So if they didn't work terribly well, they were tailor-made to become hotels. They had a huge lobby. They already had a massive kitchen and dining for the guests. And in about 1898, 1899, the apartment block wasn't working, and it turned itself into a hotel, and has been a hotel ever since.
How close are? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. What I was going to say, it's got. I mean, being very precise, it's got 331 rooms, so it's quite large, but not very large. We have suites, we have family rooms, we have children's rooms, we have a gym. And if you can, I showed you this book here. You might be able to see it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
We see it.
It says the House of Spies. When I show you this time, because actually you can see here the archway, the trees archway, and then in the courtyard the courtyard's about 40 meters long, and we've rebuilt the proper garden. The hotel was refurbished in 2012, 2013. We spent about £45 million on it. And before that, the hotel, when it was built, had a garden because it was a mansion block. So the inner courtyard had a beautiful garden that was all laid out. And in 1947, I think, that was turned into a car park. It was tarmacked over. And so it looked very municipal. Do you have that word in the US? Very
Yes.
sort of municipal. It just looked cheap and nasty, frankly. And so when the hotel was refurbished, they dug down a good 5 meters, actually, and we put proper soil down again. So the trees that people see when they arrive are actually growing. They're not in those huge pots that get, changed every 3 years because the tree's dead because the pot's got too small for it. So we're quite proud of what we've done with the hotel. I think, Dan, you've got a shot of the lobby that you're going to show at some stage, but it's a very pretty Christmas cake, wedding cake lobby.
Wow.
And this was completely repainted when we did the refurb some 12 years ago. And what I love most of all about this lobby is, well, I guess two things. One is that if you see the mezzanine floor has a curved balustrade, very reminiscent of theatre boxes. And that harks back to the designer, a man called J.P. Briggs, who was a theatrical designer and actually designed the interior of the Savoy Theatre. But the other thing I really like about this photograph, and this is just me because I hate rules and regulations, is that the balustrade which lines the top of the mezzanine, you can see it there, according to recent health and safety regulations is too low. However, because this was built in 1892, it is a Grade 2 listed building. A Grade 2 listed building means that you can't touch it without specific permission from the government. And in the battle between Grade 2 listing and health and safety, luckily Grade 2 listing wins, which I always think is.
Well, how close are Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey and Big Ben?
They're very close. They're very close indeed. Actually, Buckingham Palace is a 5-minute walk, and in the opposite direction, Westminster Abbey is a 5-minute walk in the Houses of Parliament, Parliament Square. I think we were talking about the age of the hotel, and the hotel is obviously built in London, quite obviously, and London is a very old place. And I'm pretty sure that the hotel is pretty close, if not directly above, the old wine cellars that the monks had at Westminster Abbey. So we're that close. We're that close. Downing Street is a 10-minute walk. My favourite park in London is St James's Park, which borders Horse Guards Parade, which is where the King reviews his army every June, and Buckingham Palace. It has a beautiful lake with pelicans that were given to us by the King of Sweden in 1870. I happen to know, but that's one of those things you kind of. I don't know why I know that, but I do happen to know that the pelicans were donated by Sweden. There we are.
It's important to know that.
It is important to know that. It's true.
We've heard Winston Churchill launched the Secret Operations Executive, later the SAS, on the 6th floor of the hotel. We've also heard there were secret tunnels that linked the hotel with Parliament. Is that true?
So I'll answer that. I'll answer the second question first. There is a rumor that there are secret tunnels from the hotel to the House of Parliament. My answer is, as a PR man, would you ever deny it? And also, the clue's in the name. It's a secret tunnel. It's a secret tunnel. So I really don't know. What I do know, and what isn't any longer a secret, but it was at the time, was that on July 19th, 1940, Winston Churchill announced the creation of, and here I must correct you, it's not the Special Operations Executive, it's simply called Special Operations Executive. I've no idea why, but you never say the. It's Special Operations Executive. And its job, to quote Churchill, he said its job was to set Europe ablaze. Its job actually was to do two things. It was primarily it was to train agents to operate behind enemy lines. And they had two things to do. They had reconnaissance and sabotage, which was a major activity. But they also had their job was to bring pilots back. Bear in mind, this is 1940. This is just before the Battle of Britain, the airborne battle over the Channel. And we could build an aircraft. We could build a Spitfire in 3 weeks, but it took nearly 4 months to train a pilot. So if the pilots parachuted, if they were shot down over enemy territory, parachuted out and survived and weren't captured, we needed to get them back as soon as we could. And the job of SOE and the agents who were operating in France at that time was to get the pilots back using what became known as rat runs. And so they would make contact with the resistance, the French resistance, and they would literally pass them from village to village to village, either to the Channel coast and then by boat into the UK, or back down over the Pyrenees into neutral Spain and Portugal, and then by boat from Lisbon back to the UK. And that was headquartered in the hotel for about a year. It got too big for the hotel in the end, and it moved to Baker Street. But it was headquartered in the hotel for just over a year. And the hotel has a really interesting, I think, display of original equipment that SOE was given to operate with. So we have the original biscuit box radio, so a portable radio. But this thing is the size of a head. Is the best thing the best way I can describe it. It's a metal canister that holds a radio. It's about the size of a head. And what is, I smile when I say it, but actually these were really dangerous times. The average lifespan of a radio operator operating behind enemy lines in 1940 was 5 weeks.
Ooh.
And actually, I now know, for example, I always thought that, when you see these war movies, these war films, and the guys are blowing up telegraph poles, they're cutting the telephone wires. And I always thought that was to to disrupt communication, and it wasn't at all actually. It was to get the communication onto radio, because it was much easier to intercept radio than it is to intercept a telephone wire. So actually the Nazis would have 24 hours a day in various places in France, would have the sort of the triangulation thing. So they're looking for the radio signal so they could triangulate, which is why the lifespan of a radio operator was so short. So it is. What I like about it is that the items that are on display, and there are a lot of them, they're worth about £40,000 or £50,000 together, because a lot of them are very rare, are the actual physical items that were used. They're not replicas. They were actually physically used. And what is interesting actually as well is that the quartermaster for SOE was a man called Charles Fraser Smith, and Charles Fraser Smith invented various sort of tiny radios and some quite fearsome looking knives that are hidden inside coins, and various other bits and pieces. But Charles Fraser Smith was well known by a man called Ian Fleming. And Charles Fraser Smith, as a quartermaster, was the basis of Q in Ian Fleming's Bond books. Because Ian Fleming during the war was in naval intelligence. Naval intelligence was stationed in Artillery Row, which is 1 block away from St. Ermin's. And I have to say, even now, St. Ermin's bar, the Caxton bar, is still the best bar in the area, and it was then as well. So it was used considerably by people who did things in the war that they wouldn't tell their mothers about, shall we say?
Yes.
You mentioned secrecy in government. Victor Borge tells a story about when he went to the White House to perform. He walked up the steps and he said, the Secret Service guy came up and identified himself, and then he wasn't.
I know. I often sort of tell, I take journalists around, and sometimes just people who stay in the hotel. I chat about the spy history, and they say, "Gosh," they say, do spies still use the hotel?" I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the other side of the SOE is an interesting piece about the hotel, which is factual. The other side, which is more the side of this book. In this book, I have no I don't get commissions on this, but it is available on Amazon if anybody would like it. It's actually written by a man called Peter Matthews, who sadly has passed away. He was 86 when he wrote it. And Peter Matthews was in MI6 during the Berlin airlift in 1946, and was in MI6. He was an MI6 officer for some 20 odd years, until the story he told me was he wanted to get married, but his wife wouldn't marry a secret agent. She'd only marry a journalist, so he changed careers. Mind you, no spies are journalists anyway.
Right.
So the other side of the spy history is that during the war, actually just shortly before the war, MI6, who were also stationed in Artillery Row, just over the road from the hotel, needed more officers. And they took over the 4th and 5th floors of St. Ermin's Hotel, and had officers there and officers with no R, and officers, as in personnel there, through to about the late 50s, early 60s. One of whom was a man called Kim Philby. Kim Philby ran the Russian desk for MI6. He ran the Russian desk for nearly 20 years. And Kim Philby was an agent of the KGB. He was a double agent. And there's a nickname. They're called the Cambridge Five, and it's 5 Cambridge undergraduates who, it's said after graduation, but people tend to think it's during their time as students at Cambridge, they were recruited by the KGB, and all 5 of them became very high up members of the British establishment. The best was Kim Philby as head of the Russian desk. And as head of the Russian desk, it's thought that he gave well over 900 secret documents to his handlers, possibly in the Caxton Bar, because that's where his office was. But most depressingly, actually, he was directly responsible for the death of over 400 agents worldwide because of the information he gave the Russians. And what is extraordinary, and forgive me if you must shut me up if I'm going on too long, but what is interesting is about 4 years ago, his granddaughter, who'd written a book about her grandfather, came to the hotel with a chap called Gordon Carrera, who's the security chief security journalist for the BBC, to talk about a book that she'd written about her grandfather. And I was talking to her before they did the film. And Kim Philby was eventually discovered, but just before he was discovered, he was tipped off by a friend in the MI6. He fled to Lebanon and from there went to Moscow. This was 1962, I think. And what was amazing was that shortly after that, the KGB, this is his granddaughter's telling me this, the KGB paid for his family, so her mum and dad and her, the daughter, to go to Moscow for 2 weeks every summer to visit her grandfather. And so she would go to Moscow, and he would take her to Gorky Park and push her on the swings and put her on the slide and buy ice creams. And he was a jovial grandfather. But as she grew older and learned what he'd done in life, she wrote the book as a sort of an effort to try to merge the two men that she knew, the man who'd been directly responsible for the death of 400 agents and the grandfather whom she'd loved and respected, who lived in Moscow. So the hotel, if walls could talk, I guess is always what people say. But if walls could talk, I suspect the current Secret Service would have to shut them up, because it would probably be too secret for us to know.
Okay, we're talking to Tim Fordham-Moss about St. Ermin's Hotel in London.
Going a little heavy on the political, and I'm going to ask you what you're drinking, because sadly, I'm just drinking a soda.
And I have water.
Actually, I'm drinking a Chardonnay from Napa Valley.
Oh wow, that's just that's north of me, maybe 200-300 miles. That's good to
really?
know.
No,
I'm out in California.
They're delicious. It is delicious. I have a glass. I deliberately didn't, because it's 10 o'clock. What time is it now? 20 past 10 here.
Yeah.
So I would normally have had a glass or two before 10 p.m., but I held off for your sake.
And I thank you for sharing with us. It's all good. I have to ask, was there a warning bell that alerted lawmakers when they needed to return for a vote, with something like an 8-minute warning if they hustled?
Whereas an 8-minute warning sounds like a nuclear warning, doesn't it? No,
Yes.
it's called a division bell. So in the House of Parliament are, as I said, they're about a 5-minute walk, 6-minute walk, or a 4-minute sprint.
Yes.
And when the lawmakers, as you call them, we call them members of Parliament, MPs, when there's a vote, it's called a division. The House divides into yeses and nos, ayes and noes. And when they call a vote, the MPs have got 8 minutes to go into. They literally go through a door. They go through into two lobbies. One is the yes lobby. One is the no lobby. And after 8 minutes, the doors to the lobbies are closed and locked. So the people who voted yes are locked in, and the people who voted no are locked in. And you've got 8 minutes to get there. And so a couple of the rather more frequented bars in the area that were within a 6-minute dash were given a bell, a division bell it's called, and it would ring. They had 8 minutes. And at that stage, one of the concierges would take a piece of paper, saying division bell, and walk around the hotel to scurrying MPs who would rush out the door to, and quite often actually, most of them would simply put their bar mats on top of their, they'd sort of put their bar mats on top of their glasses like this and leave their glasses there and come back. They'd be back within 10 minutes.
Oh wow! Interesting that I thought it would be a bell, but it's just he's just holding up a sign.
There's a bell in the lobby, and you can still see the bell in the lobby. It was when we reopened the hotel after refurbishment, I think 2012, 2013. The bell still worked, and its refurbished sort of appearance, the curtain was drawn across by a man called Sir Nicholas Soames, who is Churchill's Churchill's grandson. Weirdly as well, actually, the next door building to the hotel is called the Caxton Hall, and it's where Churchill held many of his press conferences during the war. And people often say, did Churchill drink in the hotel bar? And we have no record of it. But frankly, if you just done a press conference about the war up to about mid-1944, when it wasn't going very well, I suspect you went to the nearest bar and had a drink pretty quickly afterwards, actually.
As do I, yes. Now, I have several questions right here. Is it true that the infant MI6, and you may have addressed this a bit, and I apologize, and SIS used the hotel as their Section D headquarters? even
did.
before the war with Nazi Germany began in 1939.
They did. They used, as I said, the MI6 had officers there from the late 30s, so 38, 39, and section D, which was actually led by an Australian whose name escapes me at the moment, was the forerunner of SOE, which actually was the forerunner of OSS, your OSS, which became the CIA.
Yes.
And still is the CIA, indeed. So yes, I mean, we had. I've already mentioned Ian Fleming, who was in naval intelligence. The Queen's couturier, a man called Hardy Amis, who died some 15, 20 years ago now, and he was a designer of women's clothing, but he ran SOE in Belgium during the war, quite surprisingly, and would use the hotel on a very regular basis. What I liked about him, I never met him at all, but I do happen to know that his nickname during the war was Hardly Amiable, because he wasn't very nice at all. So which I thought was rather good. And people like Noel Coward was also, I don't know whether people know who Noel Coward is. He was an extremely gay, very intelligent, extremely witty man from the mid-30s all the way through to the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. He weirdly taught hand-to-hand combat. And some of the lessons were held in St. Ermin's Hotel. It's funny. The more you dig into the history, the more the hotel comes alive, as it were.
And on that, what a great setup. Speaking of MI6, did it actually recruit Noel Coward and Anthony Blunt at the hotel? And of course, did the aforementioned Churchill make and give orders right from the property?
Do you know what? I could easily say yes. I'm not sure. I think Churchill definitely was in the hotel, no doubt about it. Anthony Blunt was one of the Cambridge Five, so he was recruited by the KGB in the early 30s when at Cambridge. And Anthony Blunt actually was not a member of the Secret Service. Anthony Blunt was an art expert, but actually was the curator of the Queen's art collection. So again, he had access to all sorts of things that the Russians would find extremely interesting. As I say, the KGB chose their men very carefully, and another one, a man called Maclean, became a very famous journalist. And again, journalists have lots of ways of getting into different places and finding different facts. So the history of it is interesting. And weirdly, this thing about the secret tunnel from the hotel to the House of Parliament. There's a mundane answer, which is if you look at the original plans for the building. Bear in mind it was a mansion block to begin with, so it was lived in by so people bought apartments and lived there. I think there may well have been a private tunnel to the local underground station, which is right next door. On the other hand, there is no doubt the hotel has 3 subterranean floors. The first floor, which is sort of management and kitchens and various things, but below that there are another 2, and on the 3rd floor down there are doorways that have been bricked up. There's there are tunnels within tunnels within tunnels.
Of course. Now, speaking of one of the aforementioned, didn't Blunt turn out to be a double agent as a member of the Cambridge Five, along with Kim Philby, Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, and John, I believe it's John Cairncross?
Cairncross, yes. They all 5. I mean, what you have to bear in mind is that although MacLean and Burgess were discovered pretty early on, I mean, it's sort of in the early 50s, Kim Philby, who we spoke of earlier, was not discovered until 1962. And bear in mind that, I mean, he was head of the Russian desk in MI6, but MI6 was military intelligence, which becomes an oxymoron. It's like giant prawn, isn't it? I mean, military intelligence. It took them 15 years to discover that the head of the Russian desk was a traitor. Extraordinary and very embarrassing.
Yeah, significantly. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Tim Fordham-Moss about St. Ermin's in London.
And Tim, did MI6 ever use a hotel to give its early recruits classes on guerrilla warfare?
It did. No, it did. I talking earlier about Noel Coward, who's a famous playwright and singer actually. He did give hand-to-hand combat lessons at the Ermin's Hotel. I mean, we think they were done on the roof, which is weirdly has now become a kitchen roof garden. So if anybody comes, and I hope some of the listeners or the viewers will come and stay with St. Ermin's Hotel, and if they do, please send a note through Dan, and I'd happily give you a proper tour yourselves. But if you now eat any lettuce or herbs or tomatoes, most of those are grown on our roof. We have a kitchen roof garden. It isn't open to guests because it was a Victorian roof that has seen 4 or 5 different technologies, from room-sized iron cisterns for water through to the latest aircon units now. So we sort of put a little greenhouse in here, and there's an orchard of apples and pears that we have that are sort of strung out along one of the balconies at the top. But we try our best. Weirdly, we also have bees. We have 350,000 buckfast bees that make the hotel almost self-sustaining in honey. And indeed, they can be seen on the 3rd floor. We built the hives around a small garden that is glassed off completely, but so you can stand there and watch the bees make the honey. What else do we do? From a sustainability perspective, we obviously we planted the garden, so we've got a full proper garden, and we're hoping to win a London in Bloom competition this year. So fingers crossed for that in June. And also we're, as a hotel in central London, I think surprisingly we're dog friendly. I mean, that doesn't appeal to a lot of our US visitors who fly the Atlantic, because you can't fly the Atlantic with your dog. And actually, having flown the Atlantic several times, I'm quite pleased. I think a dog on a plane might not be brilliant. But also we're very child friendly. We have a child concierge, for example. And actually working back into the spy theme, any child who comes to stay gets a special top secret envelope with details of the spy history and a quiz that they need to go around the hotel and spy out. And if they then give the quiz to the concierge, right answers or wrong, it doesn't matter, they get taken to the Caxton bar and given a non-alcoholic cocktail, shaken not stirred, of course.
Well, the KGB spy agency lasted from 1954 to 1991, but used plenty of foreign spies. And some of the names live on in the Caxton Bar, which I believe has a menu dedicated to the Cambridge Five. Is it fair to say that each of those double agents has a drink named after him to this day? There you go.
It does.
There you go. It's exactly what I'm talking about.
There we are. There are five cocktails. The names of the Cambridge Five are Don McLean, so not the US singer. This is one of the Cambridge Five. Guy Burgess, Anthony Blunt, John Cairncross, and Kim Philby, and they're secret names given to them. I think these were given by the people investigating their various crimes. Was Homer, Hicks, Tony, List, and Stanley, and so we put together a 5 cocktails, which we hope in some way represent the 5 people, and one of which also contains the St. Ermin's gin. So about 2 years ago, we made our own gin using honey from the bees and botanicals from our kitchen garden, and that's a good strong London gin. For those who like a good gin and tonic, it's a good strong dry London gin with just a hint of honey at the back. It's a good gin, actually. It's probably worth the flight, to be honest.
So Tim, tell us about the bowler hat, the signature drink at that bar.
Well, the bowler hat signature drink is I mean, we all know what a bowler hat is, and up to about 1950, 1955, a gentleman who had a proper job in London wouldn't be seen dead without a bowler hat. Now, of course, the bowler hats are worn by our doormen, and they sort of represent a very English style, I think, is really it. And so the bowler hat cocktail has our London gin and a bit of honey in it, and is really a good strong martini.
You're tuned to Travelers Radio, now in our 13th season with Dan Schlossberg and Roger Noriega. Check us out on iTunes, LinkedIn, Instagram, or the Travelers Radio Facebook page, among other places. And we're talking to Tim Fordham-Moss about St. Ermin's Hotel in London.
In addition to spies, St. Ermin's is known for bees. And I know you mentioned this earlier, but I understand there's a bee terrace on the 3rd floor, making St. Ermin's a true B&B, where the bees get busy with nectar collected from parks that surround the hotel. Is it true that there are more than 350,000 bees? And do any of them ever escape and sting guests who don't leave good tips?
No, they don't. Actually, they don't sting guests. Actually, we do plant bee-friendly flowers in our flower garden, but no, we've never had a guest stung. I have to say, the thing about the bees is they forage up to about 5 kilometers, about 3 miles, 4 miles, and the biggest garden next to the St. Ermin's is the Buckingham Palace garden. So we can say it's royal honey if we really needed to, I think.
Yes.
But we've had bees on we started with bees on the rooftop, just one hive. This is 10 years ago now, and gradually we got more and more. So now we have four hives, and about the last time we counted them, we have no idea how many we've got actually, but there tends to be between 50 and 70,000 bees to a hive, and we've got 3 or 4 hives. But they're busy little bees, and they produce some delicious honey.
Thanks to the bees, guests get honey to take home. But can't they also get fruit, vegetables, and herbs grown on the roof of the building? We hear all of those products, plus potatoes, olives, clementines, plums, and raspberries are grown in a special greenhouse that supplies the hotel's Caxton Grill. Is this true?
It is. It is true. I don't know where you got olives from. I'm not sure we have olives up there.
I blame Dan.
That's fine. If we had olives, I'd blame global warming, to be honest. I think we're a bit too warm there. But no. We don't produce anywhere near enough to supply the hotel on a full-time basis. But we grow. I mean, weirdly, this is a fact I didn't know, but lettuce, you can grow a lettuce in 3 weeks. And so actually, if you just keep on planting them day after day after day, which is what we do, you can supply as much lettuce as you need for the restaurant. So anybody who has a salad in the hotel will know that the lettuce comes from the roof. But we do grow herbs. We grow tomatoes. There's apples and pears. We try growing potatoes, and we do grow potatoes. But you need, to supply a hotel of 331 rooms and upwards of 700 to 800 guests when we're full. You need a big roof to supply that number of potatoes, sadly.
Yes. In addition to some of the nefarious characters who frequented the place, what about the good guys? We've heard about Churchill, thank you, but how about other prime ministers or government officials? And how about members of the royal family?
Well, the hotel is security cleared by Number 10 and by Buckingham Palace.
Excellent.
The only royal I've seen there was Prince Philip, and he would occasionally pop in to have supper, actually.
Wow.
Sometimes by himself. And the nice thing is that people just left him alone. He would just sit and I think he was having a burger when I saw him, actually, which is fine. And if you remember, we had a prime minister called David Cameron.
Yes.
To 2015, and he and his wife would not often, but I think 2 or 3 times a year they would come and have supper there, because it's a nice walk through St. James's Park from Number 10 Downing Street. So we're cleared by security for those people. We do get a lot of we do get a lot of senior politicians. For example, Boris Johnson held a press conference there to tell us that he didn't want to be prime minister, and he didn't wish to be the leader of the Conservative Party. 2 days before he became leader of the Conservative Party, and 5 weeks before he became prime minister. Margaret Thatcher announced the European Union at the hotel. And there is a story I've read, I've no idea whether it's true. There is a story I've read that Idi Amin, when he came to be received by the Queen, having taken over as president of Uganda, was staying at the hotel. And when he was supposed to be meeting the Queen, an afternoon, I think it was a Tuesday afternoon, he didn't arrive. And after an hour, they sent somebody around to the hotel because they knew he was staying at the hotel to find him drunk in the bar.
Wow. Good guys and bad guys, I
Well,
imagine.
good guys and bad guys.
Right, but I'm not judging it, nor is that a political commentary.
No. It's a good story.
Yes, no, I do. I did know that one. Thank you. Could you please tell us about the architecture of St. Ermin's? We know it's a red brick Queen Anne style mansion located in central London, but isn't there a sweeping staircase designed by the same man who created the Savoy Theatre? And isn't there theatrical plasterwork in the lobby?
There is very theatrical plasterwork, as you saw in the photograph, and indeed, when the American owners who bought it and refurbished it had the survey done prior to the sale, they discovered that had there had to be work done on the plasterwork, it would have cost so much money, because there's only about 3 people in the world now who are capable of doing that sort of work. Much of it it's not done on a mold; it's done by hand, or was done by hand. So it is quite extraordinary, but luckily it survived very well. The only thing that had happened to it was that it turned yellow over the years from the nicotine, because of course everybody used to smoke all the time. But since we painted it white, it's looking absolutely bright and stupendous. You're right. The architecture is late Queen Anne style, slightly Dutch as well, I think. And if people anybody who knows London, or if you come to London and walk around the streets, you will see other mansion blocks, and they have a very similar style to them. It's a lovely red brick, and quite a formal style as well, actually. But I think what makes the hotel different from, I think, almost any hotel in London, apart from one, and I won't name that because it's a competitor. But its courtyard that you have to walk through to get into the lobby is about 30 or 40 meters long, and so the hotel is quiet. You get very little car noise or very little city noise in there, and yet you're 5 minutes from Buckingham Palace and 5 minutes from Parliament Square and the House of Parliament and the River Thames.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to Tim Fordham-Moss about St. Ermin's in London.
And the Caxton Grill, Tim, is known for its tall windows that offer great views of the courtyard outside. Please share.
Well, as I said, the courtyard is now a proper garden. It was a car park and quite dull and sort of tarmacked with white lines on it. Now it's a proper garden, so you get a nice view of trees and squirrels. Actually, you get squirrels, and our bees come down. You can watch our bees working away in summer. And so the Caxton Grill is we don't want to be a destination restaurant. I know maybe I shouldn't say that, but we don't want to be a destination restaurant for other people. We wanted to create a restaurant grill that our guests could use easily with children. So we think we offer a fine dining menu, but in a relaxed atmosphere, so that people don't feel as if they have to be posh or dressed up, or it's a home from a home. You need to feel at home in the St. Ermin's as you need to feel at home in the Caxton restaurant. I always say the Caxton Bar, and I've been in 1 or 2 hotel bars in my life, and I always think the Caxton Bar is a very good hotel bar. It's the sort of bar you can go in for a quick drink on a Tuesday night and come out on a Thursday.
That's a good way to put it. Let me ask you this. What about the rooms? Are they different or similar? What's the story with the rooms?
The rooms are not corporate. I mean, you can see there, but the rooms are based on designs by a Victorian botanist called Christopher Dresser. And so much of the wallpaper in the public rooms is actually fabric. It's silk. The wallpaper in the rooms, as you can see, is wallpaper. But if you can spot the curtains there, the designs are taken from the drawings of Christopher Dresser's botany studies. So quite often you get whole birds, or sometimes you get the interior of a tiny seed blown up, so you see the symmetry of the seed. And it's unlike most hotels. It offers a very pleasing aspect to the eye. It's very calming. And the other thing is that the management of the hotel don't like to have lots of bits of paper in the rooms. Never have, actually. So everything is via the TV. The menus are via the TV. The room service is via the TV. We've always had, in the past 12 years, the plugs that will take most plugs from any country in the world, and we respect our guests. We call ourselves a home from home. We call ourselves, it's to us it's a hotel, but to you it should be a home.
Is tea time a special time at St. Ermin's? It must be, with Andrea Vivian of the Great British Bake Off providing munchies and a tea sommelier offering a wide array of choices, all protected by a sand tier to tell guests the perfect brew time.
Afternoon tea is a great thing in the UK. Afternoon tea was invented by the Duchess of Bedford in 1742 because she found that she was getting a bit pecky in between a lunch and dinner. And literally, she invented it at her house in Bedfordshire. Bewley? No, not Bewley. I forget the name of the house. And then brought it to London for the season. And everybody in London who was there for the season suddenly started wanting to take part in the Duchess of Bedford's afternoon teas. And from there, it sort of gradually spread downwards to the middle classes and then the working classes. And now everybody likes to have a cup of tea at 3 o'clock and a sandwich or a biscuit. It's just that we do things slightly different, and we're not alone. Any hotel, most good hotels in London will do them. Most good hotels everywhere will do them. But we have a particularly nice pâtissier who makes delicious small tiny cakes and sandwiches and a range of quite superb teas that are secured for us by a very specialist tea importer in London.
We mentioned the property's proximity to Westminster, but isn't it also close to St. James Park and Harrods and the Natural History Museum, not to mention key government landmarks? And can guests get there by train, like the tube?
Oh, yes, they can. Well, it is very close to St. James's Park and to places like Trafalgar Square, but it's also on the Central and District line. So it's on the District and Circle line, and the underground tube station, the tube station we call it, is 30 seconds walk. So you can get to the museums, so the V&A and the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum and the Natural Geological Museum, 2 stops down the tube. We're also very close to the River Thames, and from there you can get the Thames buses, as in the boats, which is quite fun actually, to go down to Canary Wharf on the boat. And we're very close to the London Eye, the large, the London Eye. I don't know how to describe it. That's the one. Yes, it's large and circular, and you can get on it and you can see lots of things. To be honest, we get a lot of tourists, obviously, but also Monday to Thursday, Monday to Friday, we get a lot of businessmen, and we get quite a lot of businessmen who come and stay with us, walk to the Thames riverboat stops, and go down to Canary Wharf. Canary Wharf is obviously a huge commercial centre, but a lot of people quite like to stay away from the office and sort of see a bit of London whilst they're here. Otherwise, I used to travel the world, and I used to run quite a big agency, and I would travel the world quite a lot, and actually I too started to try and stay in hotels in the centre of a city, so you could see some of the city instead of staying in an airport hotel, for example, having 3 meetings and flying home.
We're talking to Tim Fordham-Moss about St. Ermin's Hotel in London.
Are children welcome to St. Ermin's? And does the hotel do anything special for the younger folks?
It does. We have a children's concierge. We are very child friendly. We have 2 or 3 family suites and 18 family rooms. And the family rooms basically are what we've done is we've knocked down the wall between 2 archetypal hotel rooms. So you've got 2 bathrooms, 2 beds, and room for a day bed. And also you've got 2 entrances, as it were, 2 doors, but we blocked one of the doors off. So you've got a great place to stick all the prams and gubbins and suitcases and all that sort of stuff. And those are extremely popular. We have, as I said, we've got the spy quiz for every child who comes. And also, I haven't got a copy of the book here, but about 7 years ago, I was showing some people around the hotel, and 2 women sort of joined the group because they were interested, and they were Danish, and they seemed very nice. And about 4 months later, they sent us the copy and illustrations for a children's book about the hotel, because they were both Danish. One was a child's author, and the other one was her illustrator. And they were friends, and they just come literally to London for the weekend. And so it's a little spy story where the bees are part of the story, and we've published that book, and every child who comes to stay at the hotel also gets a copy of the book.
Well, you mentioned the spy theme, and I want to get back to it. Would St. Ermin serve as a perfect setting for a James Bond movie?
I hope so. We have been in several films, several spy films actually. One called The Mona Lisa. But yes, it would, and we have connection with James Bond because Ian Fleming very definitely used the hotel, absolutely. As I say though, if MI6 and MI5 and the KGB were using the hotel, it would be a shame if we knew, because then they wouldn't be very good at their jobs, would they?
Very true. Now, with all the history that we've been able to talk about, are there any real life spy artifacts while visiting the property? And if so, can you give us some examples other than the tunnels that are blocked out?
Well, no. But no, as I was saying earlier, we have a display of original SOE equipment. So, for example, there's a gun hidden in a book. There's a pair of flying boots with a small, short knife at the top. And that knife, often people think the knife was used for defense, but actually it was there so that if you did parachute over enemy territory and survive the fall, you could take your boots off and you could cut round the ankle with the knife so that you were left with a pair of brogues. Because if you start walking around enemy territory wearing flying boots, it's a bit of a giveaway. But I think the nicest story actually I know is the first thing that you do if you're going to be invaded, and luckily America almost certainly will never be. You're far too big to be invaded. But the first thing you do if you're going to be invaded is you take down all the signposts everywhere. You take down every single signpost, which means that if you bail out over a non-signposted country, you need a compass. And what the RAF did was they issued all their pilots and flying crews with special buttons for the top button of their shirt, and which had a compass hidden inside it, little tiny compass hidden inside it, and you could unscrew it, and you could get the compass out. The Germans discovered this, and a man called Charles Fraser Smith, who I talked about earlier, who was a quartermaster, he solved that problem by reversing the screw. So when the Germans tried to see if the compass was still there, by trying to unscrew it, they were literally tightening it.
Wow.
Which I just think is a lovely story, isn't it? It's a lovely story.
It's ingenious.
Well, and simple and cheap and a beautiful way of solving the problem. I think he was a very bright man. He was a very bright man.
Yeah, no doubt. Even just with that one example. Now, is there anything else about St. Ermin's you would like to share with our audience that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I think I've been talking for 50 minutes. I think we've done most of it now, actually.
Tim, it has been an enjoyable and an enlightening 50 minutes, though.
Well, it's been very kind of you to put up with me, I have to say.
Oh, and it's the other way around, sir. The other way around.
But as I say, if your listeners or viewers come to St. Ermin's, if they get in touch via Dan, if I can, I'll happily make myself available to give them a quick tour of the hotel and tell them a bit more about the history. I'd be very happy to do that.
Very nice.
How can viewers learn more about St. Ermin's?
They can go to look at the St. Ermin's Hotel.co.uk, which I think is streaming on the screen as we speak.
Yes.
And they'd be more than welcome to do such things as that.
Our guest tonight has been Tim Fordham-Moss, founder-director of Wicks Hill Limited, a world-class public relations firm specializing in travel. Thank you, Tim, for being our guest on Travelers Radio.
You're more than welcome. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope I haven't bored too many of your viewers or listeners.
No, not at all. And thanks for staying up late for us.
Not at all. Time to go to bed now. Good night, all.
Thank you. And now that we're on the cusp of another baseball season, this is the perfect time to order my new book, Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron. Dusty Baker wrote the foreword. Get it tonight from Amazon. And that's it for this edition of Travelers Radio. Now, this is Dan Schlossberg along with Roger Noriega saying thank you for your time this time. Until next time. Next week, we'll talk to my friend Cindy Cockburn, author of the new Travels with CC column in Bay Magazine in the Tampa Bay area. Don't miss her. For now, good night and stay safe.